Also, if there's anyone that's not on our mailing list, I'll pass that around. Email goes out every Wednesday morning. Most of you are probably on it, but if you're not, then how's the FBI going to find it when they round us all up? So get on it.
They don't want us.
And on the right-hand column of this, some of you have heard me say this before, there's a column that says Friends of Burning Books. And what that does is sign you up for a mailing that goes out every season. And if you get that, it's an opportunity to chip in a few bucks, lend some support. It's really what keeps us going and what keeps amazing events like what we have here tonight happening, right? You probably know these books. We were talking about jokes earlier about that these are actually carbon-based physical books that you can do all kinds of stuff with, including read, right? They're a bit of an antique concept at this point, but they're very important. And so that's why we have a bookstore where that doesn't mean that we make a lot of money out of it or that we can really keep things going out here without a little bit more help. So that's why we have the Friends of Burning Books. So if you're able to do that, please do. And in the same notion, this is the Holy Grail of burning books. If you can chip in, it makes a big difference. Helps make things like this happen here. And as you know, we've been doing this for 5 years. We intend to do it many more years after that with your assistance and solidarity. So please chip in. Now, all of that being said, there's a restroom up here. Feel free to use it any time. And I had the fortune of seeing Thomas Drake talk. Was it yesterday? It's been a long couple days. Liza got her cast off this morning. It was my last day of classes. Just this stuff. So anyway, yeah, yesterday at Niagara University, and I think it is going to be a really unique, refreshing perspective for our crowd here at the bookstore. So Thomas is a big name, actually. You know, it's a frontline interview of him on the internet, and when I was looking up media releases and just doing basic internet searches, this is everywhere. The amount of press that his case got is amazing. And if you're not familiar already, Snowden cited he couldn't have done what he had done without Thomas Drake. So let's give him a nice warm Buffalo welcome.
Well, it's a real pleasure being here. This has been long in the making. I remember Leslie reached out to me last fall, and then as we developed what it would look like, and based on I work full time at an Apple store in the greater DC area, and went back to school to get my PhD. Just defended my dissertation at the final orals this morning.
Wow.
So there's some relief right now. No further changes to the dissertation. So there's and then speaking at Niagara University, Dave, thank you very much. So the partnership, and as I was sharing with Leslie earlier, I really feel at home here. So it's one of the silver linings, in spite of everything that happened to me, and I'll be sharing some of that. It's interesting. You know, I never imagined I'd be standing in front of audiences, small and large, and this is actually my preferred sort of space because it's much more intimate. It's in a bookstore. The library was always my favorite place to go to when I was growing up, on a green in the center of Wells, Vermont, or in a school library, or any town I go. One of the first places I would go to was a bookstore or the local library. So seeing real books, carbon-based units, you know, has a real atomic structure, right? And not digital. You know, you actually smell the pages, read the pages, open the pages. Yeah, just so it's a very welcoming space as well. So just want to share that with you. I do have an interesting tale to tell. My intent is to talk for 45 minutes, maybe, okay? Because I think Dave and Leslie will attest to this, that the real conversation begins when we begin to talk and with each other on issues of common concern. And if there's anything about my story, and there's many themes and threads to it, all right, and my focus here is going to be more on the activism side in terms of what I was faced with and what I ended up doing, taking action based on what I was confronted by and where I was located. It's really the human part of this, and I think that's what binds us. That's what elevates us, that's what energizes us, that's what enervates us. And so in sharing this, it's to also connect to your own stories, it's to connect to other activists, it's to connect to those who stand up and speak truth to and about power, and all across all of sectors of society, and not just the United States. So part of the silver lining is this opportunity. Part of the silver lining of what happened with me is I've met many, many other people from many other walks of life, including around the world. And in some cases, a little daunting. I've had to turn down a lot of talks. Just the demands are great, and it's one of the dynamics that's come with being a public figure. You know, I was just another person in the world, right, with a very small community of people who knew me, and then the government saw fit to make me quite public. But I take responsibility for that as well. Right? So, which is part of the story. But you are looking at a human being born in 1957 in Shreveport, Louisiana, the son of an officer of the Strategic Air Command of the United States Air Force during the Cold War. Lived in a lot of different places, but you're looking at what the government labeled an enemy of the state. And you know, that has a certain you know, it's still, I mean, and I'm, you know, this is sort of the human side of this, and you'll probably feel it from me, you know, to have the government, your own government, the government I took an oath 4 times to support and defend, that Constitution, right? 4 times, twice, you know, Air Force, Cold War, I used to fly an RC-135s, at RAF Mildenhall, doing strategic reconnaissance, listening in the communications of the Warsaw Pact, became an expert in East Germany, a police state. It's part of never imagining that would be used as a playbook for what I ultimately was encountering, the deepest of state secrecy after 9/11. I had been a Navy Reserve Intel officer, I was at CIA for a short stint, and then I was at the NSA, right? So, you know, that oath that I took, that oath, you know, it's a piece of paper, right? And I've had a lot of people, even in my network, it's just a piece of paper to them, right? Some historical document that, yeah, well, of course, it was, had to form some government, right? So I've also had to deal with sort of who we are in the matter, and it's not always pleasant. It really isn't. Holding up mirrors, not just to others, but to yourself. You have to often confront very uncomfortable truths, uncomfortable facts, uncomfortable realities. This bookstore, I love the name, by the way. This bookstore is filled with what happens, right, when you stand up, right? And I'm someone who stood up, and I'm someone who survived it. I am well aware of those who have paid far higher prices than me, okay? But because I'm here standing in front of you as an enemy of the state, I think I also serve as hope and inspiration, and I say that with some emotion. Okay, it's part of my civic responsibility, right, to do that, right, with you, right. And every time I've shared this story in various flavors, and this will be Leslie and they were their guests yesterday afternoon at Niagara University. It's going to be a little bit different, but some of the themes are the same. But I'm going to focus more on sort of the deeper human side of this, because there's something that is often lost. It's often lost with just labels, titles. We're a flood of information in terms of what do you want to know? Well, just Google it, right? Well, we lose something if that's all there is in terms of how do we know something? How do we find out? It's really in the living. It's in the living, right? It's in the living of who we are with each other. So it's in that living that I want to share with you. And I had some pretty dark chapters, especially in the last 15 plus years. But being called an enemy of the state, I must say, it's pathological for one. But it also tells you something about that part of power deciding that you are such a threat to the order of things that we're going to really, really hammer you hard, and we're going to make sure that you pay as high a price as possible, okay? Because it wasn't just enough to say I was enemy of the state. I was in Strasbourg, France, at another conference on democracy, of all things. I was invited to speak, and it was a speaking panel. And while I was at the hotel, I got this phone call from a reporter. And the reporter said, "Have you seen this yet?" I said, "What?" He says, "Oh, there's this briefing going on from this joint DOJ, Department of Justice, DNI, this is the Director of National Intelligence. And they're talking about you, and they're talking about Snowden, and they're talking about those who would do us harm." And he started, it was about 20 minutes in, right? He literally contacted me in electronic media, and he said, "You got to see this, Tom. It's just like, wow." This is a reporter who was very familiar with what had happened to me, and this is going back now a year and a half. So this is the fall of 2015. So it turns out, I didn't know this at the time. I was aware of the organization, but I certainly wasn't aware that there was this briefing, a formal briefing. We're talking PowerPoint slides, government style. Yeah, PowerPoint. Yeah, not Peace Point. Yeah, it's PowerPoint. To make the point. Yeah, PowerPoint slides, and these slides, and there's the narration going on, and there's PowerPoint slides, and this task force, this was a joint task force, national level, insider threat task force. That's what they called it. There was a chart. I call it a rogues gallery, and on this chart were pictures of people, traditional spies in contemporary U.S. history. And under their names, including people like Robert Hansen, under their names were the flags in which they had given their secrets. So you saw flags of Russia, you saw flags of Cuba, and you saw flags of China. I was on this gallery along with Edward Snowden. Between us, and on the other side of him, were the two killers. Remember Hassan, Fort Hood, the shooters, Lexus, Washington Navy Yard, where I used to work when I was at the CIA. Under our name, and Robert Hansen was right above me. Under our names, the four of us, there were no flags. We had no country. Okay? I say that with some emotion. But to be associated with killers, we were lumped in with those who had killed and murdered people, and also those who betrayed their country. So what did that make us? Furthermore, in the narration, they described their profiling of us, me in particular, as well as Snowden. And this should really chill those of you who are familiar, and this is why I know in terms of intimacy as audience, and what's at stake, and why you can never take any liberty or freedom or rights for granted, ever. Eternal vigilance. It was stated that we had self-radicalized. It was the only place they could go to. Self-radicalized. What does it mean to be self-radicalized? I actually want to have a brief conversation, especially with this audience. self-radicalized, because you can imagine there I'm in Strasbourg, it's, it's France, and it's on the border with Germany, and here I'm at this conference in which we're talking about democracy and threats to democracy, and I had some incredible conversations over dinner and at the conference, and yet here I am in my hotel room, just sort of, even me, given all that I've been through, the government still was so ticked off that the only way that they could account for what had happened to me, the only way that they could put me in this box, okay, was to say that I was self-radicalized. So I'm just, because I had all kinds of flashbacks in the moment in which I'm hearing myself, that's why I became who I was. I self-radicalized. So what do you think it means to be self-radicalized? Oh, type of vitamin. Wow. That's a vitamin. Yeah, it was rather energizing. Yeah, I kept taking it. I sure did. Wow. Yeah, to speak truth to power, you gotta fortify yourself, don't you? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, swallow those greenies. Yeah. Self-radicalized. Anybody else? Because it's an extraordinary word used to profile someone. Anybody else? Self-radicalized.
Lone wolf. Lone wolf.
Lone wolf. Interesting. Wow. Yes.
Oh, I was gonna say it almost sounds like if there was any way to be complimentary, I think that would be it. And that because you can look at it as it's almost empowering that, like, if someone says like, oh, the youth are being radicalized, it's usually like a passive thing, like that someone is doing to you,
yes,
and you have no choice in it, and it's like someone's brainwashing you or something. But it makes it sound like you made a choice to become radical, which is kind of bad.
Which is like good, right?
Yeah.
Goodness, that bad.
I think it was for the next guy.
Think so.
Mm-hmm. They don't care about you anymore. They care about the next you. And the one after that.
Remember, the context is insider threat.
They're the ones that scare them the most.
Task force. Yeah, who's the next one? But it could be anybody, especially if you're self-radicalized. Any self could become radicalized. Wow. I took it as a compliment. I actually did. But I also took it as extraordinarily chilling, because it's also an admission on their part, we don't have any way of preventing that. All we can do is react. Or if we think you might, or a self might become radicalized, then those white blood cells kick in, right? The cultural white blood cells of our secret institutions, national security, right? Must reject it from the body, right? The dark body politic. Self-radicalized. So let me just jump back for a moment, because I've been asked since I've been here. I was actually asked, and Dave, I didn't say this to you on the way over, but during the defense of my final dissertation over 2 hours with my full committee, and it turns out I'm another first. I'm the first to actually go through the university with an autoethnographic study. No other autoethnographic studies ever made it before, which explains some of the hurdles I went through. But they have become incredibly supportive. But one of the committee members actually asked, what was that moment? Because I can actually answer for you the moment in which I became self-radicalized. So this is sort of the next, this is a chapter, but it's a flashback, right? So I'm going to keep flashing back. Where were you all? And this is more than rhetorical, as I said yesterday, but I realize this is an audience, because I can just tell you're listening, you've got some experiences, right? My favorite audience is actually the millennials. They really are. And we may have that conversation, right? Because it gives me extraordinary hope. Favorite in terms of recognizing they're the future of tomorrow today, right? Part of my intent in getting a PhD is to actually help shape and influence that, right? It turns out that there's a whole lot that they're hungry, right, for the truth. I can tell you that right now. My son's about to graduate himself next month, right? And he was 12 when everything happened to him. So, where were you on 9/11? Just like, where were you? You were here. That's right.
In Buffalo.
Okay.
I had the Dish Network was just installed that day. So I got to see Amy Goodman.
Wow. War and Peace Report, Democracy Now.
Yeah.
Got to know her really well. It's a result of what's happening.
Yeah, so I didn't have to look to CBS for information.
Okay. Others, where were you on 9/11?
I was the last one to arrive at work at the library downtown, and one of my coworkers told me that it was happening.
Anybody else? Yes, go ahead. Just.
I was in Manhattan on 14th Street and 6th Avenue.
Mm. Yes.
Boulder, Colorado, teaching French. We were 2 hours behind, obviously, so that was interesting. And they stopped all the classes and put anybody that could get to a TV.
Dave?
A similar experience. I was actually heading into a class and heard that the first plane hit a building, and at the time it sounded like an accident.
Yeah.
By the end of class, it wasn't an accident.
I saw a few other, yes.
Was teaching in Buffalo Public School, and we half heard because we're in the classrooms, and you had to wait to get to the faculty room to see what was going on.
Yes.
I was in the lobby of the Ellicott Square building on my way to work, being red baited as usual by my one-time friend Carl Palladino.
Yes, sir. Where were you? I think someone else. Sorry. Yes.
When this semi broke down by the side of the road in Indiana, waiting for a record that was only 15 minutes away, but it never arrived. And when I finally found what happened to me, it turned out they got distracted. They all through to the TV.
Anybody else? Where were you? Yes.
I was in East Aurora on the phone to my daughter who was in Japan at the time, and she told me, "Did you see what's going on the TV? It's really strange." I was at home caring for my 9-month-old daughter at the PBR. My wife was in a meeting with some folks in a PhD committee that she was the chair of. Going on.
Many millennials, I spent a lot of time at campuses, have ever since everything happened to me, and I held off the government. And when I asked that question, I was a baby. I was 2 years old. I was 4. Some high school audience have been in. I wasn't born yet. Wow. I wasn't born yet. Yes.
I was in South Florida in elementary school, Pickering. Got to leave school early. Yeah. Wasn't paying too much.
Does anybody remember where they were on the 11th of August, 2001? What is it about 9/11 then? What is it about 9/11 where you have the stark memory of exactly where you were and what was happening? What is it about 9/11? This is rhetorical because, see, my first day on the job at NSA was 9/11. Yeah. And in many respects, that first day of the job, now it was essentially an accident, but it was an accident by choice. NSA was under severe pressure by certain stakeholders that they were losing it, going blind. We're not remaining relevant. We're way behind the times. A sclerotic, incredibly hidebound Cold War institution that had largely taken on all the worst of the communist system. Soviet Union style, the worst. Yet there's this weird capitalism thing around it as well, right? Sort of this command economy, but you know, we kept the secrets with NSA, right? Never say anything, no such agency, your favorite acronym, right? These are sort of the jokes, the dark jokes. And so I ended up, it was an opportunity to serve my country again, and that in itself is a story, serving your country, what does that mean? But it was an opportunity, and I was hired in as a senior change leader. That was my actual title, senior change leader. And I went in eyes wide open. I was doing very well, a principal in a very small boutique.com. I had been on the international lecture circuit, did a lot of consulting in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, and here I was giving all that up. Sort of the peak of my career. I was giving all that up to join the NSA as a senior executive, reporting to the number 3 person. And so I remember 9/11, especially with what happened afterwards, in incredibly stark detail. And in fact, I'm writing a book about all of this with my attorney, one of my attorneys, Justin Radak. She's a whistleblower. So, and we actually break out that day, and because it's really, that's why I'm asking you, where were you? Because we actually remember where we were, for those of us who remember. That day was extraordinary, up and down the East Coast, almost like a day, like earlier today. You know, I took the ride. I'd never been to Niagara Falls, and so I played tourist for a few hours, and I actually went out in the maiden mist, you know, got wet and took some pictures, and it was fun. It was fun, relaxing, spring day, beautiful sky. That day, for me, has split my life right down the middle. There's before 9/11, there's after 9/11. In those very hours, days, weeks, months, and the first couple of years after 9/11, all that happened that I was a part of created everything else that happened later, including standing in front of you this evening. It's all because I became self-radicalized. Right? So what does that mean to become self-radicalized? I'm actually going to take the government's own profiling of me, and believe me, they did everything they could to profile me. I had to be part of some secret something. I had to be tied into somebody, right? I was a lone wolf, as it turns out. But I was in conspiracy with a few others against the United States of America. The original draft indictment that was put together under the Bush administration actually said that. Ultimately, I wasn't charged. We'll get to that part. What the government ultimately charged me with. But self-radicalized. Yeah, because in those days, weeks, and months after 9/11, what was I exposed to? But see, I had these flashbacks. I had these flashbacks to periods in U.S. history, in world history. I had these flashbacks of what happens when people stand up. I had these flashbacks where people made a difference. I have flashbacks to coming home in November of 1963 as a first grader when I was living in Austin, Texas. Walking into the house, we'd been let out of school right just before noon, and some of you are going to remember what happened that day. I walk into my house, my mom was at home, and I literally said, why did they shoot the president? Why did they shoot the president? I have flashbacks as a very young teenager, 14 years of age, freshman, Burton Seminary, now Academy, in which, as I was looking out one of the classroom windows, I'm seeing seniors burning their draft cards in the back parking lot. I remember watching in Joe McClellan's social studies class, back when they still taught civics and government, social studies. Or they still teach social studies? And okay, I'm just checking, right? Because I'm told that it's not like it used to be, right, in terms of civic education. Watching a very young Hillary Rodham on the impeachment committee, those articles of impeachment, including one of them where the president was accused, charged, because it's a special thing when you impeach a president, but those articles of impeachment of using instruments of national power against Americans. I remember the Vietnam War. I don't remember the Beatles. I don't remember the Rolling Stones. That was already history. It was history. I remember Ellsberg. I was 14 years of age. The extraordinary press conference. I've met Dan Ellsberg. It's my attorney, Justin Radak, knew after I was indicted so publicly. The only person who understood what I was going through at the time was Ellsberg. So again, flashbacks, right? So this is September 11th of 2001. Did I know what was going to happen in the next 10 years? No. But what I was present to was the subversion of the very document in terms of practice that I take an oath to support and defend. What I was present to was my own government taking the wheels off the Constitution and stepping into another vehicle that I did not recognize. An alien form of government. Emergency powers, exigent conditions, executive orders, secret presidential findings. What was I staring into? Pandora's box. And the abyss was staring back at me. So what do you do? See, this is why that self-radicalized becomes so critical in terms of how I identify with many of those that are in between the pages of the books, right here, on these shelves. When that moment in which I was asked by a committee member earlier today, that moment of truth where you can actually turn aside, and I didn't see it, I'm not going to say anything, it's not my problem. Just let the tides of history roll right over you, or right by you. Hey, it's not my problem, is it? It's not my problem. It's not my issue. It doesn't matter what I do anyways, because it's already been done, so why would I make trouble? I don't want to draw attention to myself. I couldn't do that. Growing up in Vermont, Ethan Allen, the Green Mountain Boys, Daughters of the American Revolution, the extraordinary sweep of history, reading my mom, it is some really interesting history just in terms, it's my own history. We all have our own extraordinary historiography. So here, as a more public figure, my mom was actually the personal secretary of Pearl S. Buck. That was an entire other network that I grew up with. Extraordinary conversations. 40 years in China, right? Barely escaped Nanking, right? Powers that be did not like pro-buck at all. The Presbyterian Church did not like pro-buck, her missionary parents. Chow and-Lai did not like, Mao Zedong did not like, President Nixon did not like, right? In fact, she was, at that time in her late 70s, turning 80, about to turn 80, born in 1892 in West Virginia. She wanted to go to China. And my mother wrote a book called Pro-Less Buck, the Final Chapter. They turned down her visa application. Well, here's why. What was going on with Henry Kissinger? Shuttle diplomacy. This was Nixon's, world stage event. He's going to do, he was going to make that claim to fame as a U.S. president, right? Reestablish relations, right? Or establish relations with communist China. So my take on China, obviously directly influenced by my time growing up, particularly as a very young teenager with my mom, making that trip from Wells to Danby, Vermont and back, extraordinary, right? And all the books she wrote. And so I flash all this back because that magic moment, magic moment of truth when you decide, you know what, I'm going to do something about it. And what I did is become a whistleblower. But see, in American history, whistleblowing has a different kind of, we have a mixed, uncertain relationship with whistleblowing because it's a form of tattletaling. It's a form of pointing out the error of somebody else, and it's holding up mirrors. And yet, in the grand sweep of even U.S. history, it's been truth tellers and whistleblowers, both publicly and behind the scenes, who have made extraordinary differences in the course of history. And remember, whistleblowing is just a label. What was I eyewitness to? Because I want to open it up in terms of engaging with you with respect to what's at stake for who we are as a people. And this goes way beyond nation state. This goes way beyond those constructs, those social constructs that we organize ourselves around and inside of. They become master institutions of identity. That's why the government calling you self-radicalized means you really are a true threat because we have no control over you. You're really free. You're free to radicalize yourself. So the government decided that the Constitution is the way. The failure of 9/11, almost 3,000 people were murdered, decided that in the deeds of secrecy that they would effectively suspend the Constitution. I say that, I don't say that lightly. The government still is under significant emergency powers. Most people just don't recognize it or want to believe it. All the rest is like veneer, let me tell you. I can tell you because I was there when plans were put in place for what's called continuity of government. So what the government decided to do was, you know what, NSA? This is General Michael V. Hayden, George Tenet, Vice President Cheney, and then Bush, you're just going to sign off on it. The national security portfolio being basically turned over, and this was now Cheney's moment in the dark side. Right? He now had the opportunity to restore the imperial presidency because President Nixon got a raw deal. So in some ways it was a reverse false flag, as I've said it before other audiences, a reverse false flag. Meaning it was used as an excuse for the government licensing of itself extraordinary powers. And so NSA, even in spite of all those scandals that I became aware of in my civic awakening in the 70s, where NSA was literally spying on thousands of Americans, Operation Minaret, Shamrock, every telex. This is the email of the day, right? Or the text messages of the day, to be actually more accurate technically. Every telex for decades was being given to NSA. It didn't matter who it was sent to. It didn't matter if it was inside the United States. It didn't matter if it was some foreigner. It didn't matter. It didn't come out until under Church Committee 1975. I've met the key members of the Church Committee. I was at a panel 40th reunion in DC about a year and a half ago. They've called for a second Church Committee. Of course, they're speaking in, no one wants to hear it, right? No one wants to open up that can of worms. Wow. So, NSA, you have extraordinary power. You know how you treat foreign nations and just whatever you want to collect, you collect because you can, because it's foreign? Well, take that enormous power and turn the United States into a foreign nation for the purpose of blanket electronic surveillance. And I will tell you right now, in this audience, I've said in other audiences, despite the enormity of the Snowden disclosures, the full extent of that mass surveillance has still not been fully revealed to this day. I was eyewitness to the original foundation of it. It didn't matter, because here was when I self-radicalized, to use the government's own word. The first week in October, I confront the Attorney General, and I said, what are we doing violating the Constitution? We're violating the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. The exclusive means because of all the abuses before. We have 2 standing intelligence committees. 23-year legal regime and modified 5 times to keep up. And you're just going to set all that aside as if it never existed? There's criminal sanctions if you violated it. Like 5 years in prison, $10,000 fine for every instance of a violation. Instance. And as I said to my committee, and as I said at Niagara University, he said, you don't understand, Mr. Drake. And you'll see his way in which he attempts to get around the fact that I confronted him on the PBS Frontline special from 2014 called United States of Secrets, in which I was extensively interviewed for that documentary. You don't understand. The White House has approved, it was called The Program. The White House has approved the program. It's all legal. I see some head shaking. This is a really interesting development in terms of sort of governance history. The magic word, it's all legal, somehow just, you don't have to ask any more questions because it's legal. Well, wait a minute, as soon as I heard that, the hair, I was like, figuratively, literally goosebumps standing up in the back of my head because I'm like throwing flashback to Nixon. If the president says it's okay, it's not illegal.
Right.
Wait a minute. The President of the United States has a special obligation of the Constitution to do what? Preserve, protect, and defend. I just have to support and defend. He says, and I heard Trump say words, January 20th. Extraordinary obligation. It's all legal. Wow, it's all legal. So it's legal to violate the Constitution. And you're doing this in secret. So I then say, if the laws, the statutes are no longer if those statutes and laws are no longer updates, are no longer supporting our needs, if those laws aren't working for us, given what we're facing, there is a constitutional means in the country by which you change the law. So this is after 9/11. I'm telling you because I was there, Congress just about signed off on anything. I remember what Congress did in saying when we were going around campus, and you talk about this is the psychopathy of it. It's an area of research for me now coming out of my dissertation. This sort of the psychology, all right? a pathology, but in a social setting. In secret, we're going to violate the law. But if the law doesn't work, you can change it. You go to Congress, and as I was about to say, in terms of the psychopathy of this, going around campus, when confronted, and I was with the number 3 person NSA who is my supervisor, workforce took it really hard. We knew we had failed the nation. We had failed to keep people out of harm's way, including 300 foreign nationals. Leadership didn't see it as a failure. The workforce said, we failed the nation. We did not provide for the common defense as defined under the preamble of the Constitution. We failed. This was never supposed to happen. We would never have, again, an electronic Pearl Harbor. That whole edifice has been put into place, right? Well, now there's reasons why it all happened. There were lots of warnings. I was part of that warning system going like 8 years prior. We're going around campus, and out of her mouth, she said the following. You understand? 9/11 is a gift to NSA. We're going to get all the money we want and then some. You could see people's faces like, we just failed the nation, and all you see is this a massive opportunity to have Congress write blank checks. I was actually there during the 50th anniversary of NSA, which is created in secret, literally by the stroke of a secret presidential pen, not legislative law. It's a military intelligence agency, separate from the fact that that's an oxymoron. People don't appreciate executive creation. Had nothing to do with Congress. At least the CIA was created under the National Security Act in 1947, not NSA. What would prevent NSA from violating the Constitution in the future? Now you're saying get all money and then some. So back to this attorney, this moment of truth for me when I became self-radicalized. He said, with what we want to do, they'll say no. Wow. So jump forward. CPAC. Last year, Philadelphia. Michael V. Hayden, who they keep wheeling him out because he doesn't mind at all being the bobblehead for the national security establishment. He's central to understanding my case. He knows me personally. During the debate, Lou Dobbs is moderating. Judge Napolitano, really constitutionalist libertarian, interesting person in terms of his constitutional perspective. And he's debating Michael V. Hayden. And Lou Dobbs actually asked him, what was the legal basis for all that surveillance stuff before it was legislated? There's a whole bunch of legislation that took place in the second administration, the Bush administration, under Bush's second administration. And then that framework was codified and extended by Obama. 3 words. Raw executive authority. For those of you who know history, when you have a very senior former government official saying that the basis for action in terms of its legal justification was raw executive authority, what form of governance is that? We have a lot at stake as a people. There's no guarantees. I am, in terms of the dark side of the human condition, I'm painfully aware, given my own personal experience. I've already lived the dystopian future. I know what it means to be Winston cowering in a corner. But I didn't turn into Winston and cry uncle. Because even with Winston cowering in the corner, they knew where he was. That was the only place he could go to where the surveillance cameras couldn't see him. Do you know what it's like to be followed around? I know some of you know this, but I'm just getting personally, what it's like to be under surveillance from the federal state apparatus for years. It does weird things to you. Knowing every time you get in your car and leave that they're tracking you. Knowing that electronically every single record that exists out there, they have access to. In fact, during my cooperative period with the FBI, and there'll be those of you in this audience say you never cooperated with the FBI, but I did because I continued to do what? Expose high crimes and misdemeanors as defined under the Constitution. I named names. They didn't want to hear that. They wanted to know who I had pissed off. They were simply there as a version of the United States government's Gestapo. So flashback for a moment, and I'm going to open it up because I want to end on exactly when the nightmare began. That was all because I became self-radicalized, but that was 2001. It's now the fall of 2008. I'm teaching at the National Defense University, Fort McNair, on national security policy, leadership, strategic leadership, and leadership ethics. I'm getting ready to go to work, and there's a pounding on the door because as I looked out where I was in my bedroom, I see a whole bunch of cars pulling up and a bunch of people streaming out across the front lawn. My fellow whistleblowers had just been raided simultaneously 4 months earlier, East and West Coast. My son opened up the front door. He had the presence of mind to tell me that there was someone here to see me. And I had the presence of mind to ask for their badge, the lead agent. The nightmare began. And for the next 3+ years, I have to do everything in my power with the extraordinary support of key people that came to my defense to keep the government from taking away the most precious of those inalienable rights. That they can't take away because we're sovereign individuals unless we let them. And because they didn't take them away from me, because I recognize I'm in a very unique place in terms of post 9/11 history, I was declared self-radicalized. So I want to open up for questions.